In the evening at the palace, in her room, Princess Vivian scolded her maid for not telling her that stuffing was the national flower of the empire. The maid confusedly replied that no one knew that. If no one knew it, does that make it a special fact about the world? So Awan is an ordinary girl? She's the princess on the pea, and she's taking her place now? Since it already happened, Vivian took pity on her maid and this time she forgave her. But from now on she must be more careful. If she doesn't want to hurt herself. After Miss Awan escorted His Highness into the palace, she returned to her mistress. Miss Helen asked her how His Highness was feeling. As they walked through the garden, he chatted without shutting his mouth the whole way and showered her with compliments. So His Highness was probably fine. Miss Helen calmed down after these words. She thanked Miss Awan for helping her in the garden today. But she must promise not to do such dangerous things again. She and Vivian are direct competitors. And she's just been dragged into this squabble. Miss Awan looked at Helen with a slightly guilty look and thought that by confronting Vivian, she could bring her out in the open and show her for what she really is. Perhaps the golden rose had changed her behavior. Either way, Vivian was the winner of the peak contest. If she plays a regular citizen of this country, it will allow her to avoid the battle for a while. Han Moli smiled at her mistress and said she would take her words seriously. A few days later, the royal tailors picked out the images for the banquet. Miss Helen had to choose a dress she liked. She invited Miss Awan to view the dress with her. She eagerly agreed to such a tempting offer. And so, Miss Awan's day off came, but she wasn't even particularly happy about such days. She simply had nothing to do. She wandered around the garden, scrambling over rocks and reminiscing about her past world. The past world seemed better to her. Eating noodles to another movie seemed so familiar to her. But then her loneliness was interrupted by a maid. She fell to her knees in tears and held a package in her hands. She had been told to give this parcel to the gardener, but she was very afraid. She had heard that the gardener kills people and dries them up as herbariums, and then uses them as ornamental flowers. The only thing he grows is evil. Han Moli saw how frightened this maid was, so she said she would take the bundle to him herself. The maid thanked her, and said she was the bravest of all the women she knew. Finding the gardener, she gave him the bundle. It was fertilizer for the king's flower bed. There are so many strange rumors about him, and he hasn't found contact with any of the maids except her? Han Moli asked. With a bit of a sad face, the guy replied that he doesn't get along with anyone but her. Such an answer was quite honest on his part. Since the girl was bored, she asked what he was doing and if she could help him. Since he helped her last time, now she should help him. He told her that the bag she had brought was a special fertilizer for the golden rose, and it needed to be finished today. He pointed to a huge bed that Han Moli had no idea how to get done in today. But even this amount of work was nothing compared to her job, where she had worked 72 hours without a break. In the process, she learned that his name was Alas. And during the course of their work, they became quite close friends. Meanwhile, at the palace, the commander of the guards was reporting to His Highness. The court tailor had already left as His Highness instructed Miss Helen to choose her dress first. Good. By the way, where is that strange maid? Asked the king to the commander. Though he didn't want to answer, but he had to, he said that this girl was now gardening. Though the king was more or less used to her antics, he couldn't even imagine her doing it. This surprised him so much that he even choked on his tea. In the fitting room, Miss Helen was choosing the prettiest dress she would like. The tailor told her that they were all ready-made banquet dresses for alternative princesses. She just has to choose the dress she likes. After she chooses, he will simply prepare it to fit her figure. There were indeed a great many beautiful and expensive dresses, and at last Miss Helen chose her own dress. The court tailor complimented her on her taste. It was the most expensive dress of all. His Royal Highness provided a batch of the highest quality pearls to make this dress. The tailor needed only to take the measurements of the princess so that it would be ready the next day. As he was taking the measurements from the mistress, she had one request. She asked him to pick out another dress for her. The man was only too happy to help her with that. He noticed that she was always taking care of others, and always treating others to appetizers. He and his wife were big fans of house bags. The girl liked to do it. She had nothing much to do at the palace, so she was often free. An hour later, when Vivian came to the tailor, she immediately began to resent him. Why did she have to choose a dress for the second one? The tailor replied that it was an order from His Highness. As they walked past the tailor, the maid pushed him because she didn't like him standing so close to them, and let him stay out of the way when Miss Vivian chooses her dress. It was no surprise that Vivian liked the dress Miss Helen had chosen, too, and she pointed her finger at it and said she would take that dress. Meanwhile, outside Helen's room, Miss Iwan announced that she was back. But Miss Helen warned her not to come in. She had a present for her. But Iwan had a present for the princess, too. And Miss Helen suggested that they give each other gifts at the same time. The maid gave her a bouquet, beautiful blue lilies from the royal garden. And Miss Helen brought her a new dress. When the maid tried on the new dress, it fit her just right. So how did the mistress know her size? Then she confessed that today she had secretly measured her measurements while she slept. The lilies that Iwan had brought were very pretty, and the princess wanted to put them in a vase. But Han Moli stopped her. The gardener told her that the fragrance of blue lilies is very pleasant and light. It was a variety specially bred for noble women. Iwan took one flower and pinned it on the princess's hair. Miss is always quiet, so she thought this unusual fragrance would suit her. Suddenly Miss Helen's tears began to come. Why was she crying? She apologized to the maid for seeing her bad side. She is crying because she has forgotten the feeling of having friends. To make Miss Helen calm down a bit, the maid asked for her dress. Miss Helen was supposed to be picking out a dress today, so where is it? She replied that she had asked for it to be brought to the room, but it still wasn't here. But the wicked Vivian had already taken the dress to her room, smiling and saying that no one could steal anything from her. And she would be wearing the most gorgeous dress at the banquet. Miss Helen tells us that the court tailor told her that her dress had to be given to Vivian, so he could pick out another outfit for her. But the dress he gave her was too unsightly. The princess said she didn't want to upset him, so she took the dress. But Han Moli still did not understand. If the tailor respected Helen, why did he break his promise? Was Vivian using tricks or magic tricks? Like that time with the maid? Han Moli pondered. Then Miss Helen pinched her maid and told her not to worry about her. She would just wear that dress. Still, Han Moli didn't like her mistress being so soft. This banquet is an opportunity to enlist the support of the nobility and beyond. His Royal Highness will start the banquet with the first dance. If Vivian wins, her credibility in the eyes of the nobility will fall. The banquet is only 2 days away. The dress must be altered. A miss shouldn't give up so easily. Iwan will help her with that. Even though she has to be on her guard with Helen, she still really wants to help her. She's in this world, too, after all, she's the first to lend her a helping hand. 2 days later, the banquet in the Empire of the Golden Rose began, the emperor inviting all the nobility. At this banquet, His Royal Highness must present 2 alternate princesses. Han Moli was tired, with a bouquet of blue lilies running through the garden. If she had more time, she wouldn't have to run around the garden in her dress now. Since no one was in this garden, she decided to pull up her dress so she could run to her destination faster. When she did, she really liked her idea. But suddenly a man came out of the corner. He offered to help her, to show her the shortest way. Miss Awan bowed and thanked the strange man. She was a little embarrassed by her slightly indecent appearance. The man asked her if she knew him. The girl apologized and said she didn't know who he was. But he knows the place well and helped her. He is a very kind man. The girl praised him. She would be embarrassed if she showed her rudeness. The man told her to go behind the corner sculpture, that would be the shortcut. The girl ran down the indicated path, and the man was approached by some military man. "Sir, it's late, has something happened to you?" To which he replied, he just met a very unforgettable person. After a few minutes in the palace, it was time for the prince to introduce his beautiful alternate princesses. Miss Vivian Gordon. Everyone present admired her beautiful gown with pearls. This lady should be the most popular. One lady heard that these treasures were also brought by His Highness, especially for her. Everything went according to her plan. She thought the prince could not resist her beauty. But when Miss Helen came out, all the ladies at the ball looked at her dress with even more excitement. They admired Miss Helen. "Those blue lilies are so elegant." The king, too, was appreciating the reactions of those around him. Vivian seemed crushed by Helen. Helen did a good job, but, he was sure, the most amazing thing was her maid. With the blessing of the emperor, the prince crowned the princesses in front of all the nobility. The princesses were officially announced. Iwan, who clapped in the hall, admired her creation. Even with a spare dress, Helen is not inferior to Vivian. All those days of hard work, it wasn't in vain. It was so hard to sew all those lines on the board. She's very weak at this kind of needlework. Thank goodness Helen is good at sewing. She recalled her unsuccessful attempts to patch a handkerchief. Even so, she would not let Helen sew her handkerchief. Helen is so quiet and capable, she certainly has those who love her left. Right now she has a tremendous chance of winning. And she needs to think about what she should do next. The music played and the ball officially began. The musicians played beautiful melodies that all the guests enjoyed. If the music began to play, it was time to dance. The men began asking the girls to dance. Miss Awan hoped that the prince would dance first with Helen. A man she hadn't noticed accidentally pushed her. And at that moment the mole on her hand let Han Moli know that danger awaited her. Meanwhile, the Emperor of the Golden Rose called his son to him. One of the guests he had not seen for ages. The Duke of the Golden Rose Empire, Erwin, approached them. He said hello to Vincent. The last time they met, he was as short as a cane. Now he would soon be married. To this, Vincent asked him if he had any plans to marry the Duchess. The noble ladies of all the empire would choose him. Who would want to marry an old man like me? Father said he couldn't stand noble ladies, it seems to be true. The emperor asked Erwin. What did he think of these 2 princesses for Vincent's wife? The man replied that both princesses are beautiful. But he prefers the pretty maid who talks. Now with Princess Helen. Miss Awan was very worried about the princess. Just now she had run into some strange man. Now she is worried about the princess. When the prince learned of the duke's feelings, he seemed a little sad. But with a smile, he replied that she is a very close friend of Helen's, he cannot take love away from others. Though Erwin replied that he was joking, the prince was still wary. Afterward, he asked his father what he thought of the princesses. One of these princesses would become an empress. It should be a process with appropriate character, elegant manners, and the ability to conquer any country. He has heard of the behavior of princesses in the court. Helen is generous and loving, calm and wise. The king appreciated these qualities. Gems are not a rare treasure. Helen is willing to wear them to the banquet, he thought, and the prince had better pay attention to her. The principal accepted these words. And then it was announced that the introductions were over. Now the prince's first dance must take place. It is a passionate love poem, a beautiful prince and a charming princess, all watching to see who the prince will give his hand. Listening to his father's advice, he walked over to Helen and gave her his hand. They began their beautiful dance. But after a few seconds, the prince noticed that something was wrong with Helen. She was trembling all over. Suddenly the princess fell to the floor. Vincent immediately ordered the court physician to be summoned. Iwan, who ran up to her mistress, checked her breathing. It was steady, but weak. Her birthmark again alerted her to the danger. The danger is right here. It's a blazing pain in the birthmark, and every nerve in her is in tension. Is Helen in such a state because of such a crowd? And then she felt someone running behind her. She turned around and saw a man with a knife running right at Helen. She turned around and grabbed his arm. Unexpectedly, she threw him to the floor and pinned him to the ground. The man began to mutter something. The goddamn Golden Rose Empire apparently will continue to follow you, he shouted in the direction of Helen. Everyone present at the banquet began to whisper amongst themselves. The witch had returned. Han Moli did not understand what they were talking about. After his words, the man died. He had committed suicide. His Royal Highness, with his outstanding talent and charm, calmed the panicked nobles. The banquet was resumed. Han Moli needed to leave with Helen to take care of her. But she was stopped by the prince. She, like a miraculous angel, saved his life. Would she agree to give him his first dance at this banquet? The first dance? Everyone was very interested in the king's choice. Everyone began to discuss Joanna. And to what, another of the chosen princesses? It was the lady who stopped the assassin with her bare hands. No way, how can a princess be so rude? A little embarrassed, she asked him if she could refuse. Her legs were shaky after all that had happened. But the prince said she couldn't refuse. As they danced, Miss Iwan had something to confess to His Highness. She absolutely could not dance. The prince reassured her, and told her to just follow his rhythm. When they danced, and at the same time turned to the other couples to watch how to properly perform the movements. It is necessary to herself from the fact that it constantly stepped on the prince's feet. The prince confessed to her that he had never before met a girl like her. How could she crush a grown man with such clumsy feet? The panic was quickly calmed. The emperor had raised Vincent well, but in the end, he had chosen a lady who had caught his eye as well. Said Erwin to the emperor. The emperor replied that he just hoped his son could find a worthy princess in the country.